What if the reason you constantly feel, completely overwhelmed by information isn't actually because there's too much of it?
Right. Well, maybe it's not the volume of data at all.
Exactly. What if you're just using the wrong part of your brain to process it? Because we spend so much of our adult lives treating the world around us like it's this incredibly dense, highly technical textbook.
Yeah, we really do.
Like you walk out the front door and you're immediately bracing yourself to cram for a test. You're constantly scanning for data, looking for literal signs, trying to optimize your commute, or just agonizing over the sheer volume of inputs you have to manage every single day.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And, we're trained from a really young age to extract functional, actionable meaning from our environment.
Right.
The human brain is actually incredibly efficient at this. It uses this network called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, which basically acts like like a bouncer at the door of your consciousness.
A bouncer. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, its entire job is to filter out the 99% of sensory data it decides is useless, so you can focus strictly on, like, threats and rewards.
Wow. So it's just ruthlessly cutting things out. And today, for you listening, we're going to look at what happens when you intentionally bypass that bouncer. We are putting down the heavy, dense textbook.
Yes, finally.
Today's source material is this beautifully illustrated story about a little girl named Alice. And the mission for this deep dive is to explore the surprisingly profound philosophy and, the underlying cognitive science hidden within this simple tale. It's fundamentally a story about how we observe the world.
It really introduces a method of observation that directly counters the chronic stress of modern information overload we were just talking about. It forces us to ask, like, what are we permanently filtering out in our desperate attempt to be productive?
Right, because we're missing so much.
Yeah.
To set the scene from the source imagery, just imagine this sunlit field of white and yellow daisies, and sitting on a dirt path right in the middle of it is Alice.
Such a great image.
It is. She's wearing this wide-brimmed straw hat, and she is just entirely present. Beside her is a small brown and white rabbit, a red ladybug crawling on a leaf near her knee, and an orange butterfly hovering inches from her face.
And the text establishes this core contrast right on the very first page. It tells us Alice likes to watch the world carefully, but she doesn't do it, quote, in a serious way.
In a serious way, yeah.
Instead, the author describes her method of observation as being more like listening to a song. The book notes that most people are simply too busy to play the world's small games of hide and seek, but Alice isn't.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to bring this right to you, our listener. Think about the cognitive difference between reading a textbook and listening to a song.
It's totally different.
Right. When you read a textbook, you're hunting for facts. It's active extraction. But when you listen to a song, you don't mathematically decode the notes or ask what a specific drum beat literally means. You just let the rhythm wash over you. But I have to push back here for a second. If I treat the world like a song and just passively let it wash over me, I'm going to miss my train, fail my project, and probably get fired. So how is this unserious observation actually practical for an adult with real responsibilities?
Well, it sounds counterintuitive, I know. But letting go of that hyper-focused serious mode actually increases your brain's processing capacity in a completely different domain.
Wait, really? How so?
In cognitive psychology, we talk about focused mode versus diffuse mode thinking. When you're stressed and cramming that metaphorical textbook, your cognitive load is maxed out. Your aperture of awareness shrinks to this tiny pinhole.
You just see what's right in front of you.
Yeah, you only see the spreadsheet, the clock, the immediate stressor. Diffuse mode thinking, which is the listening to the song part, widens that aperture. Alice isn't ignoring reality. By dropping the demand to control or categorize her environment, she actually lowers her cognitive friction.
So she's taking in vastly more peripheral data than all those busy adults rushing past her. Well, if widening the aperture changes what our brain allows us to see, that actually explains this really specific phenomenon Alice runs into on a morning walk to a cafe with her grandmother.
Oh yes, the butterflies.
Yeah, the grandmother is wearing this sunny yellow dress and a blue cardigan. And on the way, Alice sees a yellow butterfly land on a wooden fence.
Which is, just a standard environmental detail.
Right, nothing crazy. But then a second yellow butterfly flies past them on the path. And finally, as they walk up to the cafe, there's a picture of a yellow butterfly painted directly on the window.
Now, a highly logical adult stuck in focus mode thinking might try to calculate the statistical probability of encountering 3 yellow butterflies in sequence. Or, more likely, their RAS, that bouncer we talked about, would simply filter out the first 2 entirely because, well, butterflies don't help pay the mortgage.
They definitely don't. But let's look at how Alice processes this. She doesn't panic, and she doesn't try to solve it like a math equation. She just giggles. She views them as tiny messengers. She literally whispers, "Hello, I see you." She acknowledges the sequence without demanding an explanation for it.
The psychological mechanism at play here is pattern recognition. It's specifically something akin to the Biedermeinhof phenomenon or the frequency illusion.
Oh, right, where you buy a red car and suddenly see red cars everywhere.
Precisely. Once her brain tags a yellow butterfly as a point of interest, even in an unserious way, her RAS temporarily adjusts its filter. Suddenly, yellow butterflies bypass the bouncer.
Wow.
And by whispering, "I see you," she's actively validating that neural pathway. She is participating in the environment rather than just walking through it as if it's some sterile backdrop.
It goes beyond just spotting the same insect, though. The story takes us into the actual physics of the environment. Later, Alice is playing in rain puddles.
I love this part.
Me too. The text highlights how she watches the ripples spread out in perfect expanding circles. And immediately after, a man nearby drops a coin. It hits the pavement and spins, creating the exact same circular motion before falling flat.
And neurologically, the brain derives a massive amount of subconscious pleasure from radial symmetry. Here we have the fluid dynamics of the water perfectly mirrored by the rigid kinetic physics of a spinning metal coin.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text uses an incredible phrase for this. It says, Alice liked when little things rhymed with each other.
Visual rhyming. It's brilliant.
Visual rhyming. Think about what a rhyme does in poetry. It creates a structural connection between 2 completely different concepts using sound. This is doing the exact same thing, but using shape and motion, a puddle rhyming with a coin.
Neurologically, visual rhyming is a profound concept. The human brain basically operates on predictive coding. It constantly generates models of what it expects to see next.
Okay.
So when 2 totally unrelated physical phenomena like water and metal display identical geometry in real time, the brain experiences this sudden, unexpected alignment in its predictive model. It feels like a moment of structural poetry.
But we miss it.
We miss these moments entirely because our modern conditioning trains us strictly to look for literal meanings. We're so busy reading the street sign to see if we're late that we ignore the visual poetry happening in the puddle directly beneath it.
Which means we're just walking past these rhymes all day long. I mean, for you listening right now, think about your morning. Did the curve of your coffee mug rhyme with the steering wheel of your car, which maybe rhymed with the circular cloud in the sky?
Most likely, yes.
But you probably didn't notice because your brain was busy processing a text message.
Yeah, we sacrifice that aesthetic connection for functional efficiency. But the narrative takes this concept of pattern recognition a step further. We move from external rhymes like the water and the coin to an internal mirroring.
Right.
The text illustrates how an observer's internal cognitive state begins to sort of echo in the physical environment.
Yes, there's this quiet scene where Alice is indoors coloring with crayons. She decides to draw a small door on the trunk of a tree in her picture, just a random whimsical choice. But when she finishes and looks across the room, she spots a tiny sticker on a cupboard door. And it's shaped exactly like the little door she just drew.
It is crucial to examine how she interprets this alignment.
Because the text is very deliberate here. It states she didn't view this as a puzzle to solve. It wasn't some cryptic clue. It felt like the world had leaned over and given her a tiny wink.
A tiny wink.
Yeah.
And a wink implies a shared secret. It shifts the environment from being just a dead object to an active entity.
And once she is open to that wink, this whole rapid-fire montage of synchronicity unfolds. She draws a red balloon, then goes outside, and a real red balloon floats past.
Oh, and the orchard scene.
Yeah, she stands in an orchard thinking about her best friend, and right then, 2 yellow birds land side by side on a branch above her. She remembers the feeling of summer, and the distinct smell of oranges just drifts past her nose.
What's fascinating here is how this maps perfectly onto Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity.
Right, meaningful coincidences.
Exactly. Occurrences that seem to have no causal relationship, yet are deeply connected by meaning. And the text explicitly frames these not as grand miracles, but as, and I quote, small moments, everyday things.
Little echoes.
Yes. When your internal state is highly primed, like when you're deeply feeling the concept of friendship, Your sensory apparatus becomes highly attuned to environmental representations of that concept, like seeing two birds sitting together.
Okay, but I want to play devil's advocate again, because skeptics would just call that confirmation bias. You think of a friend, you happen to see two birds, and your brain just falsely links them. Why shouldn't we just dismiss these little echoes as random, meaningless background noise?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
But dismissing them basically strips the human experience of psychological anchoring. Sure, from a strictly materialist, statistical perspective, it's just a coincidence.
Right.
But human beings do not run on statistics. We run on meaning. When you recognize an everyday echo, your brain gets a hit of dopamine and serotonin. It creates a feeling of integration.
You feel connected.
Exactly. You feel grounded in your surroundings rather than alienated from them. Dismissing it as just a coincidence might be scientifically safe, but it is psychologically impoverishing.
That makes total sense. We dismiss them because they don't produce capital. A tiny wink doesn't help finish a spreadsheet. But recognizing that dialogue actually regulates our nervous system.
Precisely. It proves we are in a dialogue with our surroundings. And the deep dive shifts toward the mechanics of that dialogue, the actual why behind it, in the final scenes of the story.
Yeah, it happens during this really touching bedtime conversation. The room is dimly lit, casting a warm glow. Alice is tucked under this blue floral blanket, and her grandmother is sitting on the edge of the bed. Alice asks the ultimate question about all these visual rhymes and echoes. She asks, why do these things keep happening?
Because once the brain detects a consistent pattern, it inherently seeks the causal mechanism.
And the grandmother gives this incredibly soft, profound answer. She says, maybe the world likes when someone is paying attention.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that one sentence flips the traditional Western paradigm of observation entirely on its head.
How so?
Well, in psychology and design, there's a concept called affordances. A chair affords sitting, a knob affords turning. The environment offers different interactions based on the capacity of the observer to perceive them.
Okay, I follow.
So if the world likes when someone is paying attention, it suggests the environment is reciprocal. The depth of the world you experience is directly proportional to the quality of attention you grant it. It plays hide and seek, but it only reveals its structural poetry to those willing to actively seek it.
So the environment isn't just a passive screen we walk past. It reacts to our level of engagement, and that hits Alice hard. She lies in bed, looking out her window. She sees streetlights glowing like warm lanterns, a cat walking along a fence, and the wind moving the leaves on the trees.
And the author gives us a vital simile here. It says, the wind moved the leaves like pages turning in a book.
Yes, and that triggers her grand epiphany. The text reads, the story wasn't hidden somewhere far away. It was happening right now. In butterflies, in puddles, indoors colored with crayons. The story wasn't written first, it was lived first.
That realization is a direct assault on how modern humans process time and narrative.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? Because I think this exposes a massive flaw in how we operate. We treat our lives like a predetermined novel, just waiting for the important chapters to arrive. You know, the promotion, the wedding, the retirement.
It's a cognitive trap known as destination addiction. It's the belief that success, happiness, or the quote-unquote real story is always in the next location, the next big milestone.
We suffer through the present moment like it's just a waiting room. We cram the dense textbook of our daily chores, completely ignoring the visual rhymes and the echoes, because we think the mundane Tuesday morning commute isn't part of the real story. But Alice looks out the window and realizes the cat on the fence and the leaves blowing in the wind are the text of the story. She is mid-chapter right now.
And recognizing that the story is lived first, not written first, dismantles destination addiction. It reassigns value to the present moment. You stop waiting for the grand narrative to sweep you up, and you realize the narrative is being woven right now in the geometry of the puddle you just stepped over.
It's so beautiful. The book ends with a visual representation of that piece. It's this collage showing the ripples, the birds, the red balloon, and in the center, Alice is asleep with a smile. She knows tomorrow will bring more small surprises hiding in ordinary moments.
She understands the mechanism now. Open the aperture, lower the cognitive load, and the environment will supply the affordances.
The text closes by saying she knew it would happen again. The world would look her way and give her another tiny wink.
For you, our listener, navigating a culture obsessed with optimization, data processing, and hyperproductivity, the takeaway here is deeply pragmatic. You do not need to upgrade your capacity to process more serious data.
No, you really don't.
The antidote to your exhaustion is changing the filter on your reticular activating system. It is allowing yourself to enter diffuse mode thinking during your day, to step out of the waiting room of destination addiction, stop desperately trying to decode the literal meaning of every hurdle, and simply listen to the song.
Catch the visual rhymes.
Yes, let the world be an entity that winks at you.
It is giving yourself permission to view the unserious observation not as a waste of time, but as the highest form of presence.
Because the structural poetry is always playing. It merely requires a willing observer.
Which leaves you with something very practical to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. Tomorrow morning, when you step out your front door, what if the world is already mid-game in a round of hide-and-seek? What everyday echo, what perfectly mirrored visual rhyme has been waiting in your peripheral vision, simply hoping that today is the day you finally put down the textbook and decide to pay attention?